A city of frost, fire, bells, and empire. From the early 1500s to the dawn of the 1800s, Moscow stood as one of the most dramatic urban transformations in history. It began as a medieval stronghold of timber and faith and grew into a symbol of imperial power, cultural ambition, and relentless resilience. Every century reshaped the city. Every ruler left a mark, and every winter tested the strength of those who called it home. Before sunrise, Moscow often woke in silence beneath heavy snow. Rooftops sagged under frost. Smoke curled from chimneys as fires roared inside crowded homes. Then the bells began. Deep bronze bells from monasteries and cathedrals rolled across the frozen air, echoing from hill to hill. Their sound was more than music, it was a rhythm of life. Bells marked prayer, danger, celebration, and mourning. They were the city's heartbeat. At the center of Moscow's life rose the mighty Moscow Kremlin, the fortress that defined Russia's destiny. Its red brick walls crowned a hill above the Moskva River, enclosing palaces, cathedrals, and halls of power. From its towers, guards scanned the horizon for enemies, while inside, rulers governed a realm stretching across forests, rivers, and endless plains. Within the Kremlin stood cathedrals glittering with gold domes. Candlelight flickered across icons and frescoes as priests chanted ancient hymns. Coronations filled these halls with ceremony and splendor. Tsars knelt beneath sacred images before rising to rule millions. Faith and authority were inseparable here. The city believed its rulers were guided by divine purpose. Outside the fortress gates spread the vast openness of Red Square, a space alive with trade and movement. Merchants from distant regions arrived with furs from Siberia, spices from the east, and metals from the Ural Mountains. Wagons creaked across the square. Horses stomped clouds of steam into the winter air. Voices shouted in dozens of dialects. Deals were struck quickly, loudly, and often. At the southern edge of the square rose the dazzling towers of St. Basil's Cathedral. Its colorful domes spiraled skyward like flames frozen in stone. Built after great military victories, it became a symbol of triumph and faith. Pilgrims traveled hundreds of miles to pray within its walls, believing Moscow to be the spiritual heart of their world. During the reign of Ivan the Terrible, Moscow hardened into a seat of centralized power. His rule reshaped the city's identity. Fortifications expanded, armies marched, laws tightened. Bells rang in celebration of victories and in warning of punishment. Moscow learned to live beneath strong authority, balancing devotion with fear. Yet it also gained strength and unity, becoming the capital of a growing state. Beyond palaces and cathedrals, ordinary life filled the city with energy. Wooden houses leaned over narrow streets, their upper floors nearly touching. Workshops clanged with hammer and chisel. Bakers rose before dawn, filling streets with the scent of bread and pastries. Blacksmiths forged tools and weapons. Tailors stitched heavy coats to survive brutal winters. The city lived through labor. The Moskva River flowed at the heart of this daily rhythm. In summer, barges drifted slowly downstream carrying timber, stone, and grain. Ferries crossed from bank to bank, packed with traders and travelers. In winter, the river froze into a glittering road of ice. Markets appeared directly on its surface. Sledges replaced boats. Musicians played while children skated. Even the harshest season became a festival of resilience. The 1600s brought both faith and tension. Under Tsar Alexis of Russia, Moscow expanded rapidly. New churches rose across the skyline. Religious reform led by Patriarch Nikon reshaped worship and sparked debate. Monasteries filled with chanting voices and drifting incense. Faith defined daily life, yet disagreements simmered beneath the surface. Guarding the city were the Streltsy, elite soldiers who patrolled streets and protected the Kremlin. Their uniforms and muskets became a familiar sight. They symbolized strength, but their presence also reminded citizens that unrest could ignite at any moment. As the late 1600s approached, a young ruler began to change everything. Peter the Great dreamed of modernization and connection with Europe. Workshops introduced new tools, shipbuilders experimented with unfamiliar designs, engineers studied mathematics and science. Western clothing and customs slowly appeared in noble courts. Moscow stood at a crossroads between tradition and transformation. Although Peter built a new capital in St. Petersburg, Moscow remained Russia's spiritual center. Coronations continued inside the Kremlin. Pilgrims still traveled to its monasteries. The city became a guardian of memory and tradition, even as change swept across the empire. In the 1700s, elegance flourished under Catherine the Great. Moscow blossomed with theaters, libraries, and academies. Grand mansions lined wide boulevards. Noble families hosted salons filled with music, poetry, and philosophical debate. The city's cultural life grew vibrant and ambitious. The founding of Moscow State University marked a turning point. Students arrived from across the empire to study science, literature, and philosophy. Knowledge became a powerful force shaping Moscow's future. Lecture halls buzzed with curiosity and ambition. Art and performance reached new heights with the opening of the Bolshoi Theater. Chandeliers sparkled above audiences dressed in silk and velvet. Music thundered through the grand hall, echoing across the city. Moscow embraced its role as a center of culture and creativity. But the city's greatest trial came in 1812. The armies of Napoleon Bonaparte advanced towards Moscow, bringing fear and uncertainty. Citizens fled as flames consumed neighborhoods. Smoke darkened the sky. The burning city became a symbol of sacrifice and resilience. Under Alexander I of Russia, the nation rallied and ultimately forced the invaders to retreat. Moscow rose again from ashes. Throughout these centuries, the House of Romanov shaped Moscow's destiny. Coronations, parades, and reforms left lasting marks on its streets and buildings. The city grew denser, louder, and more complex with each passing decade. Daily life remained intense. Families lived in crowded houses, courtyards echoed with laughter and labor, markets bustled from dawn until night. Winter demanded endurance, summer demanded effort. Every season shaped the rhythm of survival. By the early 1800s, Moscow had transformed into a grand imperial city. Ancient cathedrals stood beside elegant mansions. Theaters and universities thrived. Streets carried the footsteps of emperors, merchants, scholars, and workers alike. Moscow had endured conquest, fire, reform, and rebirth. It emerged disciplined, radiant, and powerful, a city forged by centuries of struggle and crowned by the promise of empire. Welcome to Moscow between the 1500s and the 1800s.